Hi, and welcome to the RH Vodcast. I'm Chris, and today it's an honor to have our esteemed guest, Lavine Hemlani, who needs little introduction in the Hong Kong market. Lavine is a former M&A investment banker who has gone on to achieve and inspire transformational success and in many of us. He was instrumental in bringing myself and my co-founder Tom together, introduced us. He is a director of the fantastic ocean cleanup company Clearbot, which we'll go into. He is a co-founder of green tech platform Carbon X Global. He's a co-founder of the enormously popular and fast-growing global networking community Founders Circle. And of course, most importantly, he is CEO of train-to-hire platform Xccelerate, which has over 40,000 alumni and counting. Lavine is a former TEDx speaker who's been profiled by Hong Kong Economic Times and Hong Kong Tatler. So it is a great pleasure to have him here today. Thank you, Lavine.
Thank you, Chris.
So let's get into it. Let's start with a little bit about your early life. I understand that you grew up, born and grown in Hong Kong. What was early life like for you in Hong Kong? And what was your background like? And what were your early memories?
Yeah, I remember being a huge nerd. I remember being obsessed with wanting to learn and read things and investing in economics and energy and hedge funds and education. So I just felt like I was very, very curious all the time. I was very quiet, very introverted, very shy. So my best friend would be a book or multiple books. But I also enjoyed kind of doing things very centric around developing nations. I spent time in places like Nepal, getting to understand how it would like to be building a school or building a project. I felt very attached to, starting things that had meaning. So when I was like 14 or 15, I started a business where I could help other students get better grades by, using study notes that I created. So back in the day, you couldn't just put it on a cloud.
Yeah.
So I'd manually kind of create copies of these study guides and then sell them. I used that to create some funds for the trip to Nepal and raise some money for charity. And yeah, it was pretty fun. I remember trying to, at 15, go to some publishers and write a book about investments for teenagers and, pull together like 100,000 words. And then it was just really hard kind of managing that and university applications. But just remember being on overdrive mode all the time, just wanting to go, with an intense spark for advancement.
Yeah, but you were quite introverted, you say.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe now, but that's incredible. And who were your early influences? Was it all coming from you? Were your parents? Did they push you to always try new things and sort of and be pioneering from an early age, or did it come from yourself from inside?
I think it's a combination. I think there's a element of curiosity and this feeling of adventure. Adventure is one of my core values, and then seeking truth and seeking wisdom. I think has to come innate. It can't be forced, can't be external. Otherwise, it's not authentic, it's not pure. But it definitely helped that I could just be left alone and just be reading all day. I don't want to be in a shopping mall if I'm out with my friends or with my parents. I just leave me alone. Let me just kind of focus on things.
Yeah. What was Hong Kong like for you? I mean, growing up in those days, I've been here for 10 years, but I don't know Hong Kong before that. Was it an environment that you enjoyed? How did you spend your time in the city, outside of the city? Did you explore nature? What was your relationship like with Hong Kong at an early age?
I think it's still the same, tons of adventure, whether it's going to beaches or hikes. Hong Kong's so great for that. And then you also have a chance to go experience a lot of amazing things, whether it's restaurants or experiences or nightlife, which I don't really do that much these days. But, there's a time and a place for everything. And I think with Hong Kong, it really caters to a variety of different opinions. experiences, a variety of different expectations. You can get what you want out of it, you know.
You continue to base yourself here in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Obviously, the last couple of years have been trying for the city, but coming out of the pandemic is obviously an exciting time when things are opening up. How do you feel about the prospects, for your home city?
I feel optimistic. I feel like some dark days for all of us, whether you're a founder or just a normal person. The sentiment sucked. And, that affects you. It obviously affects you. It affects your routines, your disciplines, your mindset. No matter how strong you are, it does affect you. And I think humans are very mimetic. We're creatures of our environment. So I'm glad to see that things are opening up. I think there's going to be a strong rebound. Very optimistic about the digital landscape when it comes to virtual assets or the way Hong Kong's looking at things like ESG, Greater Bay. There's a lot of buzzwords, of course, but in general, I think it's founders, entrepreneurs kind of wanting to put Hong Kong back on the map. And you're already seeing it with large-scale conferences and events and music festivals populating every single weekend.
Yep, it's fantastic that this is happening, so we're all getting involved, I'm sure. Going back, I noticed that you started your career as an M&A, I believe an M&A analyst, and then an M&A investment banker, and that was in the States. Can you tell us a little bit about your path to the States and how that all started for you?
Yeah. I was going to go to the London School of Economics, and then last minute I kind of went 180 and decided to go to University of Chicago. I had never even been to the States, so it was just, adventure. Adventure is a theme for me. So I knew that it would be really academically rigorous. I knew that it would be completely out of my comfort zone. And yeah, when I was in college, I was pretty heads down, wanting to become a hedge fund manager or I was very inspired by Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger, that you could acquire a lot of wisdom, you could build a lot of capital and wealth by creating these investment vehicles, and eventually you could give it all back, And that, I thought, was a form of very effective altruistic capitalism where you have a goal. Mm-hmm. And I really got inspired by people like a Rockefeller or Carnegie where, over their life, they're ferocious in pushing themselves to the absolute limit as businessmen, as entrepreneurs, as investors. And then they were also just as ferocious in giving all that wealth back to society. And I think that's very important. We're all going to die. No one leaves with anything. And legacies, kind of a silly concept as well.
Yeah.
So I got really inspired by that. And then, in college, University of Chicago is one of the top universities in the world. So I had a chance to go interview and speak to a lot of these firms. And I liked the idea of working with Lazard. Lazard is one of the best investment banks in the world.
Yes, certainly.
I think what I really respected about it is how few people the firm employed. There were certain deals where other banks might have 20, 30 people, 5 analysts, 5 MDs, whatever it is. And with us, there'd be 4 people, an MD, a VP, 1 analyst, and 1 associate. And these are mega transactions. So it kind of showed me the value of lean, very plus A plus teams, and what such small teams could run circles around larger teams. And yeah, I think I got really excited about finance for a while, basically all my life, until I actually got into it. And there's a lot of useful skills you can learn in investment banking. There's a lot of very valuable tools that allow you to think and act and grow your career. But I also felt like, you're always going from one project to the next. You help this company raise a M&A round. You help this company raise financing. So it was never, you build something from nothing. And I could feel that I was feeling very restless. I needed to do something different. So, yeah.
I also come from an investments background, and I agree with you that early in one's career, there are a lot of very good qualities that one can learn. But at the same time, you were perhaps you were a company man, and these types of companies can be hierarchical. And now you're very much a leader in many verticals. You've taken on CEO positions, director positions. Was there something about the hierarchy that didn't quite fit for you? did you feel like it wasn't, you could do more with your personal development elsewhere?
Yeah, I think to each their own. Some people love building a career; it's more safe. And I think, adventure for me was, what if I left this and started something different? So I think it takes a lot of courage. If I'd known how hard it would be to run a company, I might have stayed in finance. But naivety, I was 22, and part of me was like, I'm going to go travel the entire planet now. So I took the plunge, traveled the entire world, went to 30 countries over 6 months, went from like South America to like West Europe to East Europe to Middle East into Africa and then back into Asia for 6 months. And when you do a trip like that, you kind of see that the cocoon that is New York, investment banking, and Wall Street is just a very, very, very small cocoon of what reality really is. So, yeah, you learn a lot along the way, and I saw that there's just so much to be done. When I was in Africa, I was involved building a school and building different housing projects, and I think I really fell in love with different areas of sustainable development. So I call them education, energy, and healthcare. These are the 3 areas that are sort of most important to my soul.
Okay.
And I hope to build companies in this space for many, many decades to come. And I guess if I could summarize it, is finance was a career, but, these 3 areas, education, energy, and healthcare, i.e. sustainable development, is a calling. So you have to pick. Do you want a career where you could grow like this? Or do you want to risk it all pretty much every day and go for a calling? And it's very painful, but it's also very beautiful at the same time.
I think that a lot of people would struggle to take that plunge. We recently had an interview here with Peter Crew, the former CEO of AIA Hong Kong and Macau, and one of the biggest pieces of advice he wanted to give to people was to take a risk, to challenge yourself to go further. How would you communicate what it's like to have the courage to do that to others who may be considering to do that who might be in the same position and deciding what to do next with their careers, whether they're capable of going further, dreaming further?
Yeah. I was 22 when I started, so I felt a lot of fear, and I think it's perfectly normal to feel fear, right? But every day I would wake up and I would say, do I want to focus on the fear? Because your thoughts, you can just give energy to them, or you can give energy to other things. And the things that you give energy to, they kind of become heavier and heavier. It's really just quantum physics. I would try and give less energy and power to, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing, to this is another positive step forward. This is another customer we're serving. This is, the website relaunch. This is, some marketing done effectively. This is a product designed properly. This is curriculum and content that matches my vision, my calling,
I see. Now, have you always been a very disciplined person? And what's your routine like on a day-to-day basis? Has it evolved? Has it changed? And how is your routine like today compared to what it was like earlier in your career? Yeah.
I think as I started to get more clarity, for me, the ultimate vision is, can I accelerate the lives of 100 million people before I die in education, energy, and healthcare? Wow. That's why it's called Xccelerate Group, right? Pretty large goal, right? As I get more and more clarity on how I could do that, how I could achieve that, and the sort of step-by-step that I can get there, clarity of the goal actually allows you to spend less time on vices, right?
Right.
Whether it's out drinking, partying, that's fun, don't get me wrong, but after a certain point, you realize it's, if you've got a really big calling and a really big goal, you get a lot more fulfillment from attacking this sort of, in Sanskrit, they call it dharma, or this calling, I'd say that earlier on, I had seasons. So I had seasons where I was insane workaholic, and then seasons of, okay, I need to rest a little bit. So it was a bit more like a sine wave.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine. People should find what works best for them. But as I mature, I don't drink alcohol. I like staying pretty quiet. And I think it just gives you the mental space to think. You can't be doing too many things. You have to just keep silence if you're really thinking about how you scale from a 7-figure entrepreneur to an 8-figure entrepreneur to a 9-figure entrepreneur to building multiple ventures in very, very complex industries. Like, it's not easy to build stuff in education or climate. And you need to have, I guess, that consistency. You should have, that space, that silence, that solitude. And it's not loneliness, it's just solitude, and be okay with it in order for you to collect the depth of your thinking, right? It's very easy to say, oh, let's build an education company, but there's a lot of nuances, as I'm sure even with you guys. Like, there's a nuance on the camera, there's a nuance on the recording quality, there's a nuance on the way it's uploaded, there's a nuance on how you edit it, and that's the craft, right? And so you have to, if you want to be a master in your craft, you have to have, the exoskeleton to do that. And if your exoskeleton is like this, well, your craft is going to reflect in that.
Yes.
But if your exoskeleton is like consistently going step by step up the mountain, your craft and your competency, your depth, your sort of mastery of your craft, and your pride in it and your fulfillment in it kind of mirror that discipline.
Let's move on to Xccelerate. One of the things that you've mentioned is, obviously you came from an investment banking background where the skills that you learned were perhaps more suited to some of your more recent ventures, say like Carbon X Capital or Founders Circle, where, there's an angle to it which is to do with venture capital, helping people raise money. But Xccelerate presumably started from your more altruistic side, in that you wanted to help change the lives of people. So what's interesting is that you first thought about Xccelerate. And so do you think you could speak a little to the idea generation process and what made you commit to such an ambitious project with Xccelerate and to commit to that first?
Yeah. I think I kind of just had it in my heart after that project in Africa that I wanted to do something in education. And when I came back to Hong Kong after this global sabbatical, I was tired. I was looking for jobs. I got offers at different funds, and then I could kind of feel that I'd be not pure and sort of focused on this theme of venture. What is the thing that could cause me to grow the most? Right? So I asked myself, hey, there's multiple paths here. Join venture capital, join a startup, join a hedge fund, or, start a company. Okay, well, starting the company allows you to have the fastest rate of growth. And I optimized for that, and I optimized for difficulty. I optimized for passion and sort of what my heart said would be right, which was education. I felt a very spiritual connection to it, and I still do. I think when you're so young, you don't know any better, so I kind of just jumped into it without thinking or understanding what I was getting myself into. I think what was really valuable was just piecing it step by step. Okay, so get a website, incorporate a business, get a bank account, get your first 10 customers, get your first 100 customers, make sure the product is good, make sure you start to hire a team. So, yeah, the journey was really just what's the next step. And the vision was, there's a real problem in Asia, in Hong Kong, in Silicon Valley, which is talent. I don't want to just go start an NGO in education. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I felt, hey, could I marry the business model of, educating people and getting them jobs, which is what, Hong Kong still really struggles with, which is finding good talent. And vice versa, there's a whole audience of people that want to go get these jobs, right? There are people that, want to upgrade their lives, double their income, get into more fulfilling tech, product design, blockchain, cyber careers. So if I could just match the two in a way that, quote unquote, accelerates their lives, that's a lot of value for society.
This is an area which is particularly dear to my heart because I personally attended Xccelerate, as did my co-founder Tom, where we met. I remember very clearly one of the pieces of advice you gave me upon leaving Xccelerate was that, as Tom and I prepared to start our own businesses, you said to me, be very careful who you hire and the people that you bring on board. Xccelerate obviously has some great people, a people-driven organization, What can you tell me about what you might have done better? It can't have all been smooth sailing. But you mentioned that you jumped into it. Perhaps not everything was clear or planned out. What do you think you would have, what do you think you know now which you would have done better, which perhaps might have made the Xccelerate experience for you as a founder a little more smooth and direct?
On the one hand, I'm kind of happy I just jumped into it. From ideation to launch of the first boot camp was 7 to 8 weeks. From zero to several $100,000 of revenue, website just getting off the ground. That's the definition of lean startup, right? And that is how you get your, what they call MVP out. You just get it going. On the other, I think there is something to be said about launching a bit too fast. And there's something to be said about not having a more fleshed out organization structure, more fleshed out process on hiring people, process on vetting and sort of enabling talent to thrive in the organization. So you're person A here. A year from now, what does your job description look like? How does your job relate to KPIs, OKRs, all that jargon? But really just finding smart people is one thing. Retaining them, enabling them, and empowering them is a whole other challenge. And I think it's one that you have to be very humble in, right? I think we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses, and I try my best to learn from my mistakes.
Yeah. Xccelerate has obviously had stellar growth, and one of the things that's looking forward with Xccelerate that we should cover is its Web3 focus. The world is changing very quickly, and Xccelerate as a tech upskilling platform needs to stay up to pace with that. Perhaps you can tell me a little bit about what Xccelerate has in store for the Web3 generation, and perhaps talk a little about metaversity.
Yeah. It is pretty interesting to see what would happen if you take the gamified dynamics of play to earn, not to sound scammy or anything, but there are models out there where you can generate royalties and NFT rights for content creators, curriculum writers, which we've started exploring. There are partnerships that we currently are working on with various layer 0 and layer 1 protocols so that we can help them find 1,000 developers, train them up, get them jobs in those ecosystems, which is basically like a full stack train to hire solution. There's elements of paying people to learn about the simplest of things, how to create a wallet, and there's also elements of creating like a LinkedIn or a GitHub for Web3, where you replace the idea of a resume with someone's on-chain reputation score or an on-chain credential. I think what's more important is finding a Web 2.5, and I think a lot of founders would believe, and a lot of business leaders would believe in that, where you take the best elements of free cash flow generative, positive sum businesses, and you take elements of on-chain credentials, tokenomics, whatever it is, and you come in the middle. What happened last year was it was way too fluffy and not rooted in real business ethos, which is why they all crashed.
Yeah.
And when it's too much driven by traditional businesses, then you're not willing to dare and innovate and come up with new business models or new ways of rewarding, multiple participants and stakeholders. So I think Web 2.5 is the way that we want to stay at for now. And we work with a lot of Web 3 players, and we work with a lot of Web 2 players to incorporate elements of Web 3. So we're happy at 2.5.
One of the, for me, joining Xccelerate required some courage in itself, because as a platform, you're focusing on people who may have been doing different types of traditional careers and are moving into, who want to upskill quickly through fast conversion. What would you say to people who are listening who would like to move into a more future-focused industry about making that step, and what would you say to inspire them, to give them confidence that Xccelerate is the right way to go, and that it's really the best conduit to making that transition to stay future-proofed in one's skills?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think clarity is important. To the extent that you have clarity that I want to learn this skill to create this project or embark on this career, then you can invert, right? Inversion is a really good model of thinking. Happens to be the case that a lot of people have no idea what they want, which is fine. Most of us don't. We're all figuring it out as we go. But to the extent that you have clarity, you're a banker, you want to learn data science, you want to get into machine learning at a crypto hedge fund. Well, now you know the endpoint. Now you know what sort of models are useful. Now you want to know what project Xccelerate you want to build. Now you want to know what programming language in Python is important for you. And you also want to get a lay of what these companies are hiring for. We try to break that down in every single step possible, from the career guide. Hey, on our website for free, you can see what these companies are hiring for. You can look at literal job descriptions every day that are being updated, every hour, on what these companies want. Structured queries on, hey, do they need NLP? Do they need large machine learning models? Do they need more Python? Right? You get a sense of salaries. You get a sense of soft skills, aptitude, right? And then as you're going through the course, we want to encourage you to learn the theory, which is base 1, but then your base 2 should be projects that are relevant to your interests, because you're more likely to flourish in those projects. Don't just pick a random, e-commerce cat video project, right? And then thirdly, we bring the companies to you. So PwC is a very successful example where students get a chance to get a guaranteed job offer if they pass the PwC Xccelerate credential. We're working on rolling this train to hire, where you have job guarantees or internship guarantees or interview guarantees with a number of different players in financial services, in manufacturing, in Web3, and even in retail. There's still a lot to be done, but the key thing is to try and break the gap between education and employment. The universities, the average student might take 6 to 12 months to go get a job. Even then, the company is spending 3 to 6 months to try and onboard them. That's a lot of economic waste of human potential.
Yep.
What happens if I could shorten that down from a 4-year degree into 4 months? What if that 12 months of looking for a job was 12 hours? What if the final thesis of a PhD, which might last 2 or 3 years, could be done in 2 or 3 weeks? And it doesn't work for everyone. I don't believe that we're going to replace universities here, not do I want to. But for fast-changing industries, quick courses, almost like apprenticeships on demand, we have found a very positive uptake amongst not only the students, which is really important, and the companies, which is just as important, and the government that has accredited us, and most importantly, that these 3 stakeholders keep working in a parallel network effect. They keep supporting each other on this Xccelerate Train to Hire platform.
One of the things that's been quite topical in the news of late is the effect that artificial intelligence is having on education in general. It's news stories saying that ChatGPT can teach a course as well as a teacher can. How do you see the effect of artificial intelligence on teaching, even in the broader sense, on upskilling and education? How do you see that playing out? And how do you intend to incorporate that or work with that as Xccelerate adapts into the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a shame that certain institutions and governments and educational companies are banning ChatGPT. I think that if someone wants to use it, they're going to use it. So why fight it when we should embrace it, right? It's a powerful tool. And I really believe, and I continue to believe, in a world where man and machine can create a better and more abundant tomorrow. Imagine if in education you were able to have 10,000 students all learning at their own pace. They all have their own personalized robo-tutor, but the teacher had the ability to coach them on soft skills and projects, on case studies, on your next data science interview. That's a way better use of their time than grading your homework.
Right.
Personalized robo-teaching driven by what we call deep learning is a very, very complex thing to get to, but it can be done. It is being done in the K-12 area because what you do is create these maps of learning where each topic rests on a proper knowledge and proper understanding of the previous topic. If you can create a personalized learning pathway, because every person learns and thinks differently, I think we would usher humanity into a very abundant age, and I hope that is something that we can all be more open-minded towards, because imagine a world where we actually solve climate change. It's very doable, right? You look at some of the stats out there, you only need 1% of the land to solve climate change and put, globally us into the new electric age, right? So when you look at the statistics, you can actually solve a lot of problems. Even when you think about genomics and cancer, I get a very strong interest in building a biotech company in the future. And there's a lot that things like AI can do, provided we have the open-mindedness to work with it, not fear it.
It's a perfect segue into a couple of your other responsibilities, your other business interests. The first one I wanted to discuss with you was a company which we've been vodcasting with recently, named Clearbot. We certainly think that they're very exciting in terms of what they can do for climate change. Perhaps I could hear your take on what excites you the most about Clearbot. What drove you to want to get involved? They obviously incorporate artificial intelligence as well. So it would be great to hear your take on why you're so supportive of their mission.
Yeah. Sid, their founder, is a great guy. Kind of reminds me of when I was a young founder. I took him out to lunch one day, and we were doing a project for him with Xccelerate students, doing some data science work. I loved his passion. I loved his energy. I felt like he was a younger brother to me. And I'm sure if you ask him, he'd say I'm an older brother to him. I think with founders or anyone, what I've learned is as much as we get in the early years, we have a responsibility to pay it forward to the next generation. I love his passion, but I also can see that there's a lot of areas where pointing out blind spots or giving him infrastructure and tools for him to build his mental model of impact would make very quick, high-impact change in his scale. Connecting him with investors. So our first deal with Clearbot Capital, which is my climate venture, still very, very early stages, and most of my attention is still on Xccelerate. But where I can, I try to get involved with climate founders and give them, a springboard to succeed, whether it's network, mentors, connections, fundraising, deals, revenue, and B2B pipeline. And this is mostly run by my two co-founders in the business. But what's really important is if we have the right founder with the right mission, all it takes sometimes is a bit of a playbook and steer him in. And I think we could see this rolling out like the Clearbot playbook in a variety of different stories.
On the subject of Clearbot, there's obviously some exciting developments that are happening in the future. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the mission behind Clearbot and what we can expect to hear, perhaps news flow-wise, milestone-wise, in the continued development of Clearbot over the next year or two.
Yeah, I think if you look at the VC landscape in Hong Kong, if not Asia, there seems to be a gap between seed to Series A, Series B investments. That gap is even bigger when it comes to things like climate. So, and that gap is even bigger when it comes to venture capital firms that might have GPs that have gone and started companies or gone and scaled companies and gone and exited companies, for example. So Clearbot is a way to fill that gap, right? It's driven by two very passionate co-founders of mine. One was a venture capital principal at a very large U.S. firm, and one was a very, very top-tier scientist, environmental scientist. So we've got, myself as someone who's been a founder for many years. We have someone who's very much like the science nerd, and we have someone who's like the legal DD, heads down deal guy. And yeah, we've been speaking to LPs. We're raising a fund. We've been speaking to a lot of founders, and we've shown them our stack of how we want to add value to them. And it's not just in investing in them. It's almost like very active portfolio management. So we'll take small stakes, controlled stakes, but then work with them. So like Sid, once we got involved, we wanted to make sure that we could introduce him to every sort of enterprise customer we could think of. And yes, we had a small investment from Carbon X Capital's own personal investment, right? Our own GP money. Great, but let's help him get more investors. Let's help him get more customers. Let's help him get mentorship. Let's help him get marketing. Let's help him scale his ESG. And I think that stack of how we can scale an entrepreneur is something that's very replicable.
And as a quick plug, you can hear more from Sam Cook and Velichko Yanchev of Carbon X on the Climate Tech Talks podcast, which is also hosted by my colleague Tom. So plenty to hear there.
Thanks, Tom.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the Founders Circle project. What made you think about formalizing your networking abilities into a community? What was the idea which kind of sparked that, and how has that journey been?
Yeah, I think along the way I had to go through some pretty challenging times. One of them was pretty tumultuous restructuring of the company. And I was very young, and it definitely was not easy mentally, emotionally. I felt like I couldn't really talk about it with friends or with family or with anyone really. Caused me to go to some pretty dark places. And what helped me was my co-founder of Founders Circle, who was literally, a very successful founder, but he would just force me to stay very, very focused. No self-pity, no victim mentality, none of like giving power to your dark side, and really get up in the morning at 5:30 and go run up the peak, So where do you have time to go down like negative vices, like going out partying and drinking and all that stuff?
Right.
What I will say is that it started purely just the two of us helping each other stay accountable, right? And then other founders found out about it. So it was 5 or 6 of us in a WhatsApp group. And then they started telling others. And then suddenly there's 500 or 800 founders in 20 different cities, and purely authentic. And it's just, a community. I've not monetized it in any way, and I don't feel the need to monetize it. I think it's quite a positive sum game. I've met some very, very incredible founders. I've met some of my best friends and entrepreneurs who are building incredible businesses. I have only gratitude and love for everyone that's in the group. And I'm incredibly thankful that I was given this opportunity to try and use my skills to bring founders together, because it's really hard being a founder. And there's not really a place where you can be authentic and be like, hey, this really sucks. Because,
right.
On LinkedIn, it's very easy to be like, hi, look, I'm smiling. And not everything you see is what's going on. That being said, when you are vulnerable, when you are authentic, you actually solve the issues, right? That's why you have things like Alcoholics Anonymous or the forum at Entrepreneur Circle, or whatever it might be, allow you to challenge your limiting beliefs, overcome them with strength, robustness, and triumph and become a new person. So if anything, the challenge is really just there for you, almost like an artist, to kind of emerge as a more pure, more enlightened version of yourself, which, it's a great journey. It's probably the greatest journey. It's not really about what you get as a founder. It's not really the possessions and the success and the accomplishments and all. That's nice. But I really think one of the biggest rewards is who you become. And that's very, very, very true to a lot of founders. The better I get to know them. So Founder Circle has been purely an accidental side thing. I needed it for myself. I couldn't find it in other groups. And I'm just tremendously, beyond the bottom of my heart, just grateful for everyone that's trusted me in building this community.
It's absolutely fascinating to hear that perspective. From my experience, there are plenty of networking WhatsApp groups and organizations that one can join, that one can be invited into, but they don't feel genuine. They feel manufactured. They feel like there's very little dialogue between the members. Whereas Founders Circle is one of those groups where people are constantly sharing information, encouragement, as you said, not always positive, but also just about the realities. And so I've noticed that that's a very unique aspect, and I imagine that it comes from that genuine altruistic drive. So very interesting to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the key values for us is, I even do it whenever we run these events, which are offline or even the online ones. It's, we want to help people connect. We want to help people grow. And eventually when you grow, you should give back. So connect is all about just meeting people. Grow is like, the more smaller, intimate forums, 4, 5, 6 people really holding each other accountable. And give is really one of the greatest joys of being an entrepreneur, is to give selflessly and to give as abundantly as you can.
For sure. I wanted to ask you a few questions about advice as we enter into the latter part of our interview. On a daily basis, are there any tools that you use or you recommend that make you more productive? Are there any perhaps any piece of software, any tools you use that just make things faster that people should really try out themselves?
Yeah. I think there's 2 things. One, this is more just general, right? A lot of founders, they'll do everything but the actual thing they're supposed to do, right? There's productivity. Oh, yeah, I have to get my to-do list right. Oh, I have to go by my highlighters because I need to go read this chapter. It's like, no, what you need to do is 10 sales calls before lunch, right? So sometimes the best productivity is just do the goddamn work.
Right.
But once you have that sort of deep work in play, there's a couple of things that I find really valuable. And again, find what works for you. But number one, don't confuse the work with the real work, right? When you get that right, I think splitting it up, having, and I have this on my to-do list, right? Hey, there's the deep work tasks, which I want to get to, requires me to go really deep, put headphones on, and think very strategically. Like build leverage for the company, right? Build tools, build infrastructure, build systems, processes, operations manuals, right? Build new playbooks for the B2B team, whatever it is. That stuff takes a lot of time. You have to put 2, 3, 4 hours and just bang it out, right? You can't be on Twitter, Telegram, Discord and doing that.
Right.
And then there's shallow work where, okay, could I check my email in the morning? Could I check my email in the evening? I'm very guilty. I check it all the time. But in general, if you can split your shallow work and your deep work, then you could find, slots where deep work is, I don't speak to my team, I don't speak to anyone, I just got to get that stuff out the way. You'd be surprised, right? There was one project that I was putting off for 4 weeks. I got it done in 4 hours. I just put it aside, this is the calendar, it's on my slot. I have to be in a quiet room alone, put my phone away, and just got it done in actually 3 hours and 15 minutes. So you'd be surprised actually as a founder how much leverage you can do by creating deep work and then separating your shallow work. I think you should always ask yourself, hey, this deep work, is it the sort of work that's really going to move the needle forward, right? You could spend time cold calling random people, or you could set up automations and campaigns and marketing tools and run events where it's 1 hour gives you 20 units or 30 units of output. So really just getting the input and output ratio, right? That's been a massive mindset shift for me. I actually wrote a blog post about it just this morning. But once you have that, I think very tactically on tools, I love this app called Brain.fm. Really good for like focus beats, 30 minutes binaural beats, very, very beautiful beats.
Okay.
And yeah, I think some form of meditation app, like you need something in the morning or in the evening. It does help.
How do you feel about those sorts of values among the teams that you manage? So obviously it's been very topical as we emerge from the pandemic. But what's the different leaders have different views on the balance between working separately, working collaboratively across the same table? You mentioned the importance of being able to put one's headphones on and disconnect in order to focus. What sort of boundaries do you set for your teams so that they can be as productive as possible?
Yeah. I think a lot of life is polarity. So I'm a big believer of Lao Tzu and his book, The Tao Te Ching, which is a very seminal ancient Buddhist text, but it's made a huge difference when I reread it like every year.
Wow.
What I really like, though, is that in order for us to be having this conversation, Chris, you have to breathe in and you have to breathe out, right? In order for us to experience light, we need to know what darkness looks like. When you need to do deep work, you also need to do shallow work. When you look at everything in life, it has to be a blend of both, but it's almost like a dynamic harmony. So in some moments, you need deep work like 7 days in a row. In some moments, you might need to be in meetings all day if you're doing a fundraising roadshow. I think there's a harmony, and that harmony is constantly evolving and expanding. And what's really important is being authentic, just being very real. Okay, this part of the day, week, year, season, whatever it is, very much geared to aggressive outbound, or this part is more reflective. I need to really think before I go into the next business model. That harmony is always evolving in your personal life as well. Sometimes you want to go smash those weights. Sometimes you want to take it more on the yoga and cardio, but you do need a combination of everything, and nature is the best teacher.
I see. And just to round off, you're obviously somebody who's inspired many already during your career, and there's a lot more that we can expect from you to come, I'm sure. But what's the biggest, if there was one thing, if there was one takeaway, one piece of advice that you could give to people who want to grow up and be like you, to achieve similar success, what would you say to them? What would you perhaps say to your younger self to inspire them?
Yeah, I think the concept of leverage and the concept of compounding is really important. So leverage means that, are you spending your time in ways that's really, really intelligent? I could go spend the next 24 hours going to 24 different businesses. Hi, how are you? Can I work with you? I could spend the next 24 minutes sending messages on LinkedIn. I could spend 24 minutes recording something like this and make sure it reaches 24,000 businesses. Each one of these has a different input to output ratio and leverage multiplier. And there's no rule, and everything is different. For customer support, you might need more human touch. For hardware, you might want to do it at scale. Look into your own life and your own business and just see where you can find areas of more leverage, because the billionaire, they have 24 hours in a day as well. The people that have achieved enormous success, right, that I look up to, that you look up to, they got the same flesh and blood and skin and eyeballs that you and I do. So what are they doing differently? They're doing things where their 24 hours of input, which is what we all have, are creating vastly different outputs. That's all it comes down to. And if you could study and understand those concepts from like a physics or like a real world reality standpoint, that'd be very important. I think the second thing, I know you said just one.
No, go ahead.
It's to live your life by values. So I didn't realize how important it was, but as I mature, I've kind of define my life by 3 core values, and I think you should find your own. But for me, there's truth, adventure, and service. Truth is really understanding reality, like I just said, input and output, right? How things work, how polarity works, how very complex things actually work, and you simplify it. That really enables you to see through your glasses, your lens of, your consciousness a lot more clearer, which naturally gives you way more success because you know what works. You're not swimming in murky waters. Adventure, well, my whole life feels like an adventure. Day after day, it's like one giant adventure. You quit a job, you go to Africa, you build a school, you go build a company, you build some more, you fail, you struggle, it's an adventure. And then the last value is service, which, I believe to be very important as I mature, and I would love to help millions of people accelerate their lives in some way.
Lavine, a fascinating and inspiring interview. We're grateful to have you as a guest, and we look forward to following your future progress, as I'm sure our audience does. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
All right.